Today on the podcast, I have Ryan and Sean Kleier. These are two guys I've known for a while, and it's been so fun to see what they've done. First, Sean is an actor, comedian, improv star. He's been on everything from Ant-Man and Marvel shows to The Intern with Robert De Niro. And his buddy Ryan is a producer and comedian in his own right. They have their own creative agency, and they've helped produce videos that have gotten over 250 million views. And they've done it all with one thing: comedy and humor, which is really hard. And so we go on the podcast today to talk about how you make a video go viral by being funny. They talk about comedy 101 and like the 5 things to consider when trying to be funny. They get into how you can come up with ideas and frameworks for brainstorming. They even get tactical on how they edit and make videos to put it out there. But just talk about all the things they've done that have bombed, things that have worked, the small tweaks they've made to make a video go from thousands of views to millions of views. It's really fun to hear their approach. And there's a reason why huge brands and actors from Ed Helms to Jennifer Lawrence work with them to make video content. So this is a fun one. If you're at all looking to get better at storytelling, at making content, at doing videos, and you want to do it in a creative way, I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. And in the show notes, I'll even put a link to their website and some videos they've done that we referenced in the past. But really hope you enjoyed this episode with Ryan and Sean as we talk about their agency and what they're building.
You cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure.
We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did.
Nobody was making any money at all. Most people thought the internet was going to be a fad.
All right, so Ryan, how do we know each other? When did we meet?
Oh my goodness. I think we met like 14 or 15 years ago, maybe in New York. We were like sort of running in the same circles, I would say. I was dating someone that is friends with your wife, and I was at your wedding. So that wasn't the first time I met you guys, but it was close to the first.
Yeah, and I don't know if Sean has been to this magical place, but we really bonded over one night at a Ukrainian spot in Soho where it's going to be an interesting night when you walk in and a 70-year-old woman hands you a shot of vodka, and it's not an option. You throw that shot of vodka down your throat before you enter in, and you think you're getting stuff for free there, and you walk out and you realize they get their money back on that, and you pay other costs for it. But I'm still feeling from that night.
I love how on brand Ukraine is. Just in all respects, they're just like, this is a fake shot, go and back, vomit, then we bring meal. Like they never depart. They're very true to who they are.
Yeah, horseradish infused vodka is what we have.
Is that what it was?
I'll never forget that.
That'll clear your nostrils.
Seriously, if you think you're coming down with the flu, pop over there and they'll clear you right up. But but it's been fun though, because as we met, it was like right as I was trying to start the agency, and you guys were kind of just off to the races with what you're doing with video work, and Sean, what you're doing with the acting. So it's been fun to kind of watch from the sidelines. And so we're going to get into the background of what you guys have done and what you're doing, because it's super impressive. But this podcast is about me and my needs. And so this is going to be very self-serving. You guys do something that so many brands, mine included with Neat, that we want to do is we want to make a video that's hilarious, that goes viral, that is like the Dollar Shave Club. And it is so freaking hard to do. It's like, what is the formula? And Ryan, you did a talk on this that kind of knocked my socks off. But like, you guys do this. Sean, you do improv and you're a comedian. Like, can you just help people like me? I want to do comedy. What is like comedy 101 when trying to do a video? Because I feel like there are a million ways to do it wrong that so many people can fall into those traps.
100%.
Do you want to take that away, Ryan?
I mean, I'll start by saying that you don't get there immediately, and you don't get there by like reading a book and being like, I'm a comedian now. Like you get there by eating it over and over again for a decade, I'm going to say, and making really horrible, terrible stuff.
I did read the book.
Correct.
And then I got up on stage and I did stand up for the first time, and I was booed out of the room, and then probably booed out of the room for years, because people think humor is something that spontaneously comes from you, which is true after you understand it and you do the work to know that there is theory behind it and there is an approach that you need to really have a skill set in. Otherwise, you go up and make a fool of yourself. All right, sorry, Ryan, I interrupted you.
But that's how you get better, is you just grind down the hard edges of the not funny until you get to a sculpture that looks a little bit better. But it takes a really, really long time. My wife's a stand-up comedian. She's been at it 8 years now and is crushing on stage wherever she gets up. But it takes a long time to get there. So that's
that's the adage about stand-up is you are as old as the years you've been doing it. So that would make Jess 8. And that just kind of translates how comedians think about comedy, is that it does take a while. And once you are 15 or 20 or 25, sometimes, I mean, Louis C.K., before we knew how horrific he was, before we knew what was really going on with the guy, I don't think you could go back and watch that stuff and be like, oh, that's still funny. You'd be like, no, that's way too real. But he didn't get good until he was 40-something. Yeah. And this isn't to say it's impossible to understand and know how to do it soon, but it takes that long time.
I was going to say that we've distilled 5 different sort of points that are kind of necessary to make sure you're not doing it wrong, so to speak. And the rule number 1 is to be authentic. If you're authentic and you're coming to your audience with a message that strikes true to them, which is more art than science, and takes a long time of intuition to sort of understand if you can hit the nail on the head. Once you get to a point where you can speak authentically and surprise them, then you'll elicit an emotional response. That's what you're looking for.
I'll pop in with an example as you lay these out, Ryan. When I think authentic, I think I draw a distinction between progressives, homeowners who are turning into their parents. The trope there that makes us laugh is like, God, that is what parents do. And like, oh God, I did do that. The core is authenticity, because that trope is real. It's valid. So we'll talk more about how to find those things, those tropes. But then think of Liberty Mutual's Emu, who is just a weird thing. And I don't think any of us are like looking forward to seeing what the Emu does next, because the comedic premise was like, here's a weird thing. And there's no authenticity to that.
Yeah, the premise is, what if there was an emu? Like, who cares?
That's not there's nobody who's like, yeah, I've often thought, what if there's an emu? No one has ever thought that. So there's your difference.
A quote I really like about this is from Jon Stewart. It says that comedy is truth written better than you could have said it yourself. And that's sums a lot of it up. I mean, everyone defines comedy differently, but to me, that really speaks to what
I couldn't agree more. Like in New York, whenever we go to the Comedy Cellar, my favorite comedians are the one where you walk away, you're like, he nailed it. It's better than I could have articulated it. And you like, that's when you know it's a good comedian or set, when you walk away and you like can't get it out of your mind. You're like, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of it that way. And for me, that's where I get really excited with comedy or any of these like viral campaigns where they just knock it out of the park because they're so in it.
I'll put a pin on this because I want us to come back to it. People can hear that and then say, well, what about absurdity? What about absurdism and ridiculous humor? And it's still, I mean, ask me about it later so we can keep this thing moving, but it still has a core of truth that then we go bananas from. But we'll talk about that in a little bit.
So if you're authentic and you're surprising, you have a very clear point of view on the subject matter at hand, whether it's T-shirts or in our instance, we work with a lot of political groups. So like that clear stance needs to be very clearly articulated from a brand perspective. Fourth is playing to the height of your intelligence. There's a tendency in comedy and especially improv 101 sort of classes where someone comes out and they're like, what's a stapler? And you're like, we're way ahead of you, bud. Let it go. Nobody cares. You're smart. You're as smart as the character that you're playing, and you have the knowledge that your character has. Like, let's move it along. And then the fifth point is something they teach at UCB really well, which is this amorphous sort of idea of game.
By the way, that's Upright Citizens Brigade, which is an improv troupe for people listening. So sorry, I just had to, I had to drop some knowledge there. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Very good, very good. So Sean and I both went through all the improv training at Upright Citizens Brigade in New York around 15 to 18 years ago, and years of classes and going on stage and being very unfunny and but this idea of game is something that they teach later on and is really conceptual. But the concept is to distill it is, what is the premise of the sketch or scene or commercial that you're putting together? And it can be as simple as a pattern that gets broken, or it can be as complicated as a worldview distilled into a character or a place. And the point is, once you sort of settle on what this thing is, then you're asking the question, if that's true, what else is true about this world? If this one weird thing is true. So I think one of the best examples of work that we've done around this was Gil Fulbright, the honest politician. And this politician says the quiet part out loud, that he doesn't care about you, that he just cares about his donors, that he's in it for money, all these things that sort of we think about. But so if this character is true, what else is true? Well, he would drive a bus with his face on the side that says, I'm for sale, and he would give campaign speeches and dog other politicians about what they're doing wrong. And so you can kind of take this idea and then build out a world from it, and then concepts for advertising sort of just fall into place.
No, I think that's so cool. And another thing you hit on is like, okay, you're giving me these guardrails of comedy. I love authenticity, clear point of view, and playing to the height of a person's intelligence. But then like, okay, I got this. Okay, now think of a funny idea for neat sweat-proof shirts, and I'm staring at a blank piece of paper. And it's like what's more intimidating than that? And you guys have hit on, and you've kind of joked, like this idea of brainstorming, how it's like a horrible word, but it's actually like good in practice. Because like, how do you guys, you like close this huge account, you have like the foundations of comedy, but how do you be like, okay, we're in the writing room, let's be funny. And let's think of something that's going to go viral and get millions of views. Like, first off, that's a lot of freaking pressure. How do you like give yourself the space to be in the trust tree where you can spitball? And like, how do you approach that?
I think it's important among each other and among anybody we're interacting with to just, first of all, say no bad ideas. Every idea triggers the next idea. So like, let's create a nice, safe sandbox. Let's also put parameters on it. One of the most important things you can do is not look at a desert and say, where were we going to find a sandcastle, but look at a sandbox. Here's our budget. Here's some of our targets. Here's what we want to achieve with this piece of content or this campaign. It creates parameters so that you're not swimming in an open sea, and then, you actually begin to apply game theory. I would say you agree with that. That would be your next step, right, Ryan? You would look at the product or the company and how it's perceived and how people interact, or how people interact with the problem that the product is solving or the company is solving. And you would say, what is true about that for people? And is there a truth within there that could be exaggerated or made to feel like a larger problem than it is for someone, or less of a problem than it is for somebody? You try and like by degrees nudge these truths in different directions in your mind to see if anything starts to trigger you to feel like, oh, that's kind of funny, that's kind of interesting. And it's a process of kind of distilling these little bits about the product, about the company, or about your client that might resonate with people. It doesn't happen immediately. I mean, we could do it with sweat-proof t-shirts now, and we could generate probably 10 really terrible ideas in 5 minutes, probably 2 really good ideas in an hour, and probably the idea that we want a day or two from now. You know.
Is there something to like having space to let it cook and then coming back to it? Because I feel like with writing, I just want to like get something on a page and then go away, and then I come back a little bit fresher. Like, do you have to give it that time to cook?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
100%.
Especially when you think you have it. The mistake I still make is like, oh, that's the idea. That's great. And I'm like, I'm ready to go to, whoever needs to see this. Let's share it far and wide. And then a few days, I'm like, oh, God damn it.
Yeah.
Why didn't we just take another minute or two?
Like, oh, wait, Geico also has a lizard? Shit. Yeah, I can't do that. Yeah.
That's where I got that from every commercial I've ever seen every 30 minutes for the last 10 years. That incubation time is key, and more than you think.
Yeah. There's boring stuff too that is like 8 hours of sleep, getting exercise, eating a Mediterranean diet, like all those things are really important to, and being relaxed, because your best ideas come in the shower or on a run or when you're out on a drive, like whatever you do that relaxes you, do a little bit more of that. And it's not going to feel like work, but your brain is always churning on the problem, even when you're not actively working on it. And you're going to make connections that you wouldn't see anyway. But when all that sort of groundwork is done, like what Sean's talking about is like this middle section of like problem solving between the goals that you have at the top, and brain swarming is really about creating a diagram between, at the top you have your goals or sub goals, things that you want to hit. You want to reach this amount of people, you want them to get this message. And at the bottom, you put all the resources at your disposal. We have video production crew, we have paid advertising, we have our newsletter, we have this. These are all the ways that we can reach people. And in the middle are ideas that are connecting as many resources as possible to as many goals as possible. And creating that sort of framework is how you're going to be able to brainstorm in a group, which is like Sean and I don't play charades against us. We can read each other's minds. Sean will pull an obscure Simpsons reference out of nowhere, and I'll get 3 lines ahead of him right then, because we have over 30 years of being friends and connection. But with a big group or with a new client or something like that, running this process is going to draw new connections that outsiders wouldn't be able to necessarily understand about your brand and what you're trying to do, with Neat, Jim. But we might be able to make connections, and your internal team is going to have more resources and knowledge of what's available and the goals that you want to hit. And so doing that work together is going to lead to more connections, which is really the game.
Yeah. I like those guardrails to be able to set on how to approach this. Another thing you guys have hit on is also like factoring in, or even starting with the emotion you want to create or elicit, right? And you've kind of hit on a few different ones, like any color with that, because I'm thinking through that, and I'm thinking through, is this something people want to share? Like, does it make me look smart or clever or witty or cool because I share this? But like, can you talk about like, one, what are those emotions that you're kind of pulling at, and then how you factor in like the emotions or in the shareability?
Totally. So there's 4 sort of categories that we try to evaluate ideas that come out of a brainstorm or just a brainstorming session. And the first thing that we look at is what emotion does it elicit, and is that emotion really, really strong? And I had a friend that worked at a company in London that was doing testing on video marketing, and they were filming people's face as they showed them viral videos. And they could predict within 90% how well a video would do based on how much someone's face changed when they watched a piece of content. So that eliciting of a strong emotional reaction is your number one signifier that the concept that you have is really, really good. And the only way to sort of internally test that when you're writing a concept is, if reading it on the page makes someone who hasn't heard the idea laugh, you're on the right track. Because that is really a conceptual jump, that reading something and then having laughing from it is really, really huge. But in terms of what those emotional responses are, happiness, surprise, admiration, and sometimes anger are some of the best motivators.
Careful with anger there.
But you got to be really careful with anger. Yeah. Especially in politics. Ooh.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I bet.
Yeah.
All right. So again, this is self-serving. So for Neat, what's the low-hanging fruit? Like, how do I like minimize the chance that this will fail? Like, what should I go for?
I'm gonna hop in with there's a few ways that people inevitably do this wrong, and I think it starts with prioritizing your result. Limu Emu is an example of people being like, we really want everyone to pay attention, so let's do something weird. What's weird? This is weird. Go for it. And that doesn't often trigger any kind of excitement from me. I think the most fail-safe way you could do it is to try to get real honest with your brand or your product first. And here's an example. Arby's sucked for a long time, and arguably it still does, depending on how much you like the meats. But they grew revenue by a mass amount when they switched from being like, we sell good sandwiches, and everybody was like, no, you don't. To being like, we got some meats, anybody?
Yeah.
And tweeting about how, they're kind of a joke, and tweeting that they're like, this is like sending a bunch of Arby's for lunch to Jon Stewart because he was making fun of them. They began to interact with their audience authentically, honestly. And anyone can do that. It's easier for an existing brand because you already have an identity and you could play against it. As Pepto-Bismol, you could say, here's a bottle of Pepto-Bismol, share this commercial, and no one will. Or you could be like, hey, no one wants to hear from Pepto-Bismol because it means something bad has already happened to you. And people will be like, oh, that's a more interesting way to engage with Pepto-Bismol. For D2C, it's probably harder because there's no existing identity, but there is an existing relationship to this problem you're trying to solve. And I would put your attention towards that problem and how people are experiencing it, or even how people are experiencing all these brands coming to solve that same problem, how people are experiencing your competitors in that space. And I would build a concept off of that can honestly interact with customers at their expectations for your new brand. That's my sense on it.
I like that. It's like start with the authenticity of what problem you're solving or your existing brand and see what emotion is connected to it rather than be like, this has to be the funniest ad ever made, or I have to be the Old Spice guy, like riding on a unicorn or whatever the centaur. I forgot what he was, but that thing was everywhere for a while.
I'm on a horse.
Yeah. Well, there's your absurdity. Pin him. Well, when we get back to absurdity, I want to talk about him.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So, all right, we're in the trust tree. We're doing the brainstorming, swarming. We're thinking through the emotions and how people want to share. Like how, not to get like too technical, but like we run quite a bit of Facebook and Instagram ads. And you can put so much work into something, but if you don't package it the right way, if you don't have the right headline, if you don't have the freaking right thumbnail, like all this work you went into does not matter. Like it's really the first 3 seconds on a lot of our like user generated content ads and whatnot, where we're just getting so into the minutia, but that's worth it. Like, are there some like final mile things that you guys really kind of put a lot of like TLC into because you're like, this could make or break the ad or make or break this amazing video we put all this time into?
Definitely. Having a hook within that first 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, especially depending on the platform, is really, really key and important. So the first opening line or opening image, whatever you're presenting the audience with right off the bat, is so important. But also, you mentioned the headline is really, really important. Sometimes a headline is so good, you write the concept to fit that. Because
like
you're like,
the headline first. Yeah,
exactly. So we got tasked with making a spot for the Drug Policy Alliance. And you're an elder millennial like me, so you'll get this reference, but Gen Z does not. But we brought Rachel Lee Cook back to do an updated "This Is Your Brain on Drugs" spot.
Yes,
And that headline is like Rachel Lee Cook comes back to right a wrong that was sort of presented before with bananas. And we're like, anything we do within that, as long as we start with her holding up a frying pan, that's going to catch.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's like, it's that simple of just like, oh, this. And if you can execute, then it's really great. And you do have to execute. I mean, there's timing issues with comedy that, you know, we've seen a lot of great premises get destroyed in edit or the direction on set because it's like, you don't want to broadcast the joke. You want to play to the height of your intelligence. So it can be understated and people will get it. You can trust your audience. That's neither here nor there. But so headline is really, really important. But the other thing that we're always thinking about is when someone in the best version of this, when your audience shares this, what does that say about them? What does it make them look like? What's their reputation feel like when they share it? Do they look cooler and then the no? Or do they look like they're hawking for a brand? Or do they look crass or cynical or lecturing? Like, that's all negative. We don't want that. We want them to look cooler and smarter because that's how everybody wants to look to their friends. And that's the only reason why you share anything online is to look better and to share an emotional state that you had. And we kind of distilled this when Sean came to me like 17 years ago, maybe. I don't know how long it was, with this brilliant idea of taking a bullhorn around New York and giving Bill Pullman's speech from Independence Day all over New York. And then we just cut it together.
It was celebratory.
But it was also like ironic. So sharing it made you look a little nostalgic, a little ironic, a little ahead of the curve, but also enough patriotism there because it is genuinely moving that it really created a good vibe when they put it out to their friends. And we're like, oh, why did this do so well? And it took us years of like thinking about it to like sort of, break that down.
Isn't it funny? You like reverse engineer. You're like, holy smokes, we actually did do the formula and we didn't even know we were doing it. Because I think I saw a thumbnail because, Sean, you look hilarious because you look like a presidential candidate that's on the road, that's like really campaigning. You got the rolled up sleeves and stuff. It's like, were there any things to that headline or thumbnail or the opening spot that made it work? Or was it just the fact that you nailed the content that you didn't even have to worry about those little details?
It's definitely, overlapping Venn diagrams of success. And, if you have one circle that's just, it's funny, that doesn't mean people are going to see it. But funny mixed with IP, mixed with timely and relevant, which it was released on the 4th of July. Some mixing many of those things together definitely amplifies your shot at success. Though we've made stuff that we were like, that's gotta hit 3 or 4 Venn diagrams. We feel really good about it, and people didn't care. So there's still, there's still a lot of randomness to the internet and mystery, and I think it's hard to actually accept that because you're like, no, we want to succeed. We did everything right. Give us, love us, love what we do. Now do it. So, but definitely it increases your chances of success to kind of hit multiple hot spots.
Gosh, what do you have any examples of things that you posted that totally flopped and then you did tweaks where it worked? Because we were doing some ads for Neat and we had this one that I was like, this is the banger. This is the one. And we did the test and it didn't work. And I was like, the data's wrong. I was like, the data can't say that. And we made some tweaks to like the opening thumbnail. We had not that really attractive professional model and someone that was looked more like the average day person. And it started to work. But we were about to just like toss it aside. And I've been guilty of calling things a fail early, but like I'm kind of loading a lot of questions in here, but like any examples of ones that you tweaked or how you think about testing these things? Like what is normal when putting things out there? Like, oh, we do 2 variations or we're doing 30 variations.
That's a difficult question. I mean, A/B testing for your thumbnail image and your headline, like all that, you got to write a ton of those to get one that really, really works. So write a bunch of those and then do the A/B testing. But sometimes, conceptually speaking, like especially when you make a spot, you're locked in. That's what you've made is what you've made, and you shot it a certain way so that it would be a certain type of thing, to work conceptually. So sometimes you can't change it all that much. Sometimes it's just timing of like, this needed to be released this time when the news cycle was actually talking about it and people were talking about it. There's a little bit more energy about it. So sometimes like sitting on something that you love because it might play better later, sometimes that can be helpful.
There's also
I don't know.
There's some stuff that's misleading about testing generally. Is that there's a huge difference between an audience that's being asked to evaluate something and an audience that is passively interacting with something. And I don't think that we kind of take a good accounting of that when we push our ideas forward, because we've seen a lot of bad choices happen based on testing that then kind of end up neutering comedy or neutering the surprise because people are sitting there thinking too hard about it. And, this isn't to say that you do away with testing at all, but have some intuition about what is actually going to excite people or stop them, make them pause to watch it. And I think testing is most important for that initial thumbnail or click, but not to evaluate the entirety of a spot. I think that there's just a lot of risk in there that we haven't yet baked in.
A lot of testing of political spots in particular. So whenever we're working with, politically affiliated groups, we're listening to the focus groups that they've done. I've sat in on some of those focus groups. I've been behind the glass to see some of that stuff. And when you give 8 to 12 people a choice between two bad options, the data that you get back is not great. It's not good. So part of it is really putting the creative muscle behind it so that when you do show two options, there are two really good options. And because when you're scrolling through things, your competition isn't the A/B test of what you're putting out. Your competition is a gorilla spinning in a bucket of water, or a dog that catches a frisbee off a dock and lands in like it's everything. Correct. Yeah. But if you have to dig too hard to get to the message, or you're asking an audience to really climb a hill to get to where you're at, it's never going to work. It's just, you can guarantee that it's not going to work.
Yeah. No, that's a good call out, because I think that can be glorified a little too much, where you're missing the forest from the trees in it. You know what I mean? So I want to get in, because you kind of mentioned how you guys got started. Like, you guys were living in New York. You're doing comedy, improv. I mean, and good for you for sticking with it. I feel like if I get booed off a stage, I'm like, well, I'm done. But clearly you have to do that to break through. And since Sean, you've gone on to be an actor, you've been in a Marvel movie. I mean, Ryan, you now have this whole production thing going with the amount of huge accounts you're working with and budgets, kind of go through, was that always the plan to go down this path, or did it just evolve?
Both.
Yeah, definitely. A bit of both, man. Yeah. I think stumbling blindly is sort of our main method of moving through life. Yeah, I would say. That's our chosen approach.
We're definitely lucky. I mean, we're definitely lucky in our respective endeavors and our combined endeavors. I mean, Sean got his first agent off the Bill Pullman Independence Day spot.
Isn't that amazing, getting discovered like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't think I would end up acting, because I'm a comedian by nature and I like doing what we do kind of more sometimes. And then that stuff just started to take on a life of its own. So it was definitely a stumble blind sort of thing. But then this is too much fun for us. So, we love sitting down, spinning up ideas and creating the craziest shit we can think of, because that's really what I want to be doing. And I honestly, I don't have the energy to get booed off stage anymore. I don't have the energy to be out every night getting booed. So, yeah.
Yeah, but they're definitely, I remember one of your first stand-up gigs, Sean, it was right down the street from us at the Creek in the Cave in Long Island City.
This is. I don't need you to bring this up. Jesus.
Sean was just like, I have to take a walk and think about my life. Like, this is so bad. I really need to. I was like, do you want some feedback? He was like, no.
I just got my feedback.
Yeah.
It was blank stares and
crickets.
a couple of actual angry people. It was real bad. Oof. I'm sweating thinking about that bomb. And I bombed a lot, but that was the bombiest bomb I ever bombed. Yeah, that was bad.
Like, you keep doing it, Yeah.
Well, what's the worst part of bombing? Is it while you're bombing, the awareness that it's bombing, and you're like, I still have 4 minutes? Or is it just like afterwards? And like, how, like, you've clearly come out of that dark spot, but like, even with kids, I think about like getting them those reps where you fall down, how you get back up, how you have grit. Because, I mean, that stuff's hard, and I feel like with comedy, it's so much more heightened because it's so real. Whereas in business, I can fail in silence and it maybe doesn't hurt as bad. And that's at a different level. Like, what's your mental state in that, and how do you come out?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, look, the worst part is the moment you're bombing and you definitely have to get through many more minutes on stage and the time slows. And you're panicking, but you're still talking about something, God knows what, and it's getting worse. And you just wish you could like pull the words back into your mouth. You just want to crawl away and die. That's the worst. But then there's something extra difficult because afterwards you can't help but evaluate it which first comes with I'm worthless. There's the first that, and once you get through it, you go, okay, what about what I'm doing? Is just horribly wrong. How do I need to shift my entire approach and mindset? And all this needs to happen within the course of a day, maybe, because you're due to be on stage again the next night. If you're going to keep doing this, you got to keep doing it. And that second part is hardest because you have to, you see the comics, you go, no, that was funny. Screw that audience. I'm going to do it again. And the people who end up succeeding are saying, okay, I got it wrong. The audience was right. Mm-hmm. What do I do to fix this? And that part's extra hard because you don't have the answer yet until you go up there and you screw up even more and a few more times. And I remember that one horrible bomb I got, the feedback was, for me, it was like, those were made up stories. What I was doing on stage didn't actually happen. So there was no truth to it. So I knew that there was no truth to it, but it didn't tell me what was funny, what wasn't. But it steered me towards, okay, let me say some stuff. Let me now go on and be a bit more vulnerable about who I am. Mm-hmm. And that's a first step, So unfortunately, there were many more like rakes to the face I had to take to get to the next, to step forward with it. So.
And I like how you're like, oh, do you want feedback? Like, nope, I got it.
Yeah.
I'm good. Thank you. No, I'm good.
Yeah.
But I think he gave it to me anyway. Eventually, yeah.
I don't know that that's true, but I do know that like the hardest part about doing something public, standing in front of somebody else and expecting to make them laugh, is you have to really have a very strong understanding of yourself and how you come across and the general vibe that you put out there. Just like a brand needs to understand who they are, what they talk about, what their values are, who they're speaking to, and what they're offering, all of that. It's the same sort of process, but one of my favorite jokes that Sean used to do on stage, sorry, Sean, was he would pause and then look at his hand and go, I should have written down notes. I drew a dog on my hand, and that would always get a laugh because of his general sweet himbo nature. He understood exactly how he came across. Like, no one's dumb enough to actually do that, but the kernel of truth inside of it is enough for people to be like, yeah, you sweet Dumbo. That's so funny,
I did play a dummy on stage. It came naturally, and I might have to finally agree that is my authentic self.
but even the dumb ideas that were being presented, there was a second layer of truth over that, of like, you understood why that was funny. That's why it's being presented this way. You were initially you play a character because we're both from Kentucky and we both moved to New York and now LA, but like playing off that Kentucky persona of like, I don't know, man, this is what Fox News tells me is true, so it must be true for you too.
This kind of, I don't know, reframed something in my mind. And you asked earlier what the best way to do when you have that blank page in front of you. And having had this conversation, what I'm thinking is what I would do next for any given brand. I would say, what if that brand had to stand on stage and do a stand-up set?
Mm-hmm.
And if they started with what they want the audience to believe, the audience would boo them. But if they started with what's true about themselves, it's why often the first joke you'll see a stand-up do is self-deprecating.
So it's like
Because it
vulnerable.
signals the audience. That's
Yeah.
right. Signals
Yeah.
to your audience, I know what you guys think of me. Whether that's, there's a lot of different types where it's honest. You're like, I sound like Dora the Explorer's backpack if you have a tiny voice,
Yeah.
and everybody laughs because that's true. Or you step on stage and you go, I know I have a very imposing disposition. So you've gone the other direction. You've used bravado to sarcastically tease yourself, and everybody still can hop on with the joke. There's so many directions you can go with the same joke, but it all pulls back to what people believe to be true about you, and brands need to start with what people believe to be true about them.
Yeah, that's so fun. I think it's some of my favorite comedians. I've seen a bunch, like Ryan Hamilton. Ryan, I think we've seen him together in New York. Like he has an opening joke that does exactly that, which is very cool. One thing I want to hit on, I want to talk about the business side of your all's like video production creative agency, because you all work in a world where like you can close huge like 6-figure deals, right? But then it can be like potentially feast or famine. I know from experience as an agency, like 1 minute you're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to hire all these people? Then another minute you're like, is anybody out there? Talk to me around like the path and where you're thinking for this. And I'm going to lead the witness here and give my, you didn't ask for it, but my opinions on what you guys should do. So here's my first one is, I love that you're niching down on like political campaigns. I wish you would come over and help more and more brands, because you have the chops and you guys have already done that with what we work with. And there's like 2 ways in. One is the unfair advantage having Sean and what you're doing on the acting side. You could do like, there's 2 models, right? There's the obviously like Ryan Reynolds and fast advertising and what those guys are doing, but that's at like a whole nother level, which is amazing. The second, Ryan, we've talked about it, but Sean, have you seen, it's Greg Tube and like Nate Weir. They're basically like an improv group that has their own creative agency. And they launched on the back of True Classic, where they would do these videos for True Classic, and they're hilarious. And it blew up their creative agency. And now there's like a wait list to even get like a bid from them. And I see the stuff they do, and it's really good. But honestly, I see the stuff you guys do, and I'm like, there's no reason like you guys shouldn't be doing that. Because I talked to my buddy Ryan Hamilton, and he talks about sometimes the best thing a comedian can do is leverage the ad spend of a brand to get their face out there to then blow up. Like even like Flo from Progressive, like everyone knows Flo because of the ad dollars Progressive was pumping into it. So I'm kind of all over the sword. So I'm like what I'm thinking you guys should do, even though you didn't ask for my opinion. But you have such an unfair advantage of like the comedy chops that you can produce. You can actually be the character in it, and then like you're growing following as well, Sean. But those are 2 models, the Ryan Reynolds fast advertising and Craig Tube and Nate Weir, what those guys are doing, that is really impressive.
I agree. End of comment. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. There's another group on the East Coast called the Harmon Brothers too that do a lot of I think that's probably closer to, because Sean is not, and Sean, don't take this the wrong way, Sean's not Ryan Reynolds in terms of cultural impact. Okay. So like, maybe if you're interested in being the face of a brand, Sean, we can go that route. I'm trying to get my wife to do more. I mean, she does a lot of UGC stuff on Instagram and TikTok. And that can be a tough racket. But I think in terms of like what we're set up to do, we started in politics because we were interested in politics and we wanted to make a difference in 08-09 when the housing market crashed, and we were like, we need to get money out of politics. We found the group that believed in us enough to say, here's $300, will you make us something? And it kind of started from there. You remember? Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, we might have done one for free, but like we did feeders for $300. And we called a lot of favors.
I would never have agreed to that.
It was the 2010s, before inflation. Yeah. So, and we understood that to gain a foothold, we needed to make a niche for ourselves, and comedy and politics is a weird niche to be in. But we've been at this enough, and we have enough proofs of concept that branching out into other verticals is really the next step. So whatever we can do, and part of that has been like a small step, which is political campaigns, and because there's a difference between awareness marketing and campaign marketing in politics, but those principles that we've shared with you today and that we talk about and we do are applicable in so many different realms that we can help D2C brands, sell more T-shirts, for example.
There's definitely like a big wide open door for us to walk through. Oh, I missed that. Yes, to T-shirts. But I think that there is something to where campaigns are at politically right now, or marketing wise right now, that there's a huge opportunity because everybody knows campaign ads and everybody knows they're all the same. They start with negative music that says so and so, or they start with positive music being like, we need change, and that guy is dressed like every human you've ever seen run for office ever. Yeah. So obviously we're doing something wrong here, because that defies everything anyone would tell a brand to do at any point ever. So there's applying not just humor but fundamental branding to an individual when they run for office. And I think that there's just enormous opportunity to get behind people that we believe in that manner. So I'm excited about some of our focus there, but at the same time, people need this kind of comedic approach. They just at least need these ideas in the back of their head. Every brand should say, even if we don't go this direction, we want 8 of these ideas in the back of our head, because if this isn't working, we need to pivot, or at the very least, we need to understand, not in an analytical way, how our customer base views us, but from the lens of comedy, how our customer base might view us. How would they actually make fun of us? How would they tease us? That's like really valuable information for a brand to have about themselves.
Totally.
Because it does open marketing doors,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you guys are smart too to stay premium and not try and like productize this. I do think people would even pay you not even for the final output, but to come in and like honestly run a session on like how to think through comedy, even like what you're saying, because then they could use that and go off on their own, and then you could scale your stuff a little bit more. Because I forget what agency where they like basically sell their comedy writing room to brainstorm concepts and headlines and whatnot. And I mean, certain companies that have the budget are more than willing to do that. And it's kind of energizing for the team to get training in that.
Totally. You could easily assign each person to bring 5 weird ideas about their company, or 5 little things they think are niche about their company, or 5 ways people are talking about their company online. Everybody comes with one of those, and you spin a comedic premise off of each of them. You'd leave a session with 20 premises or whatever. Yeah, I totally could see that. It's crazy. Why don't we do that? Let's do that.
Well, I mean, we have done that before with our nonprofit clients, but not wholesale, not as what I forget, gun for hire.
But I think the most important part to remember is that we've been too altruistic for too long, working with nonprofits that we believe in, and it's time for us to find the skeeziest industries that we could possibly partake with and make them fun, baby. Make everybody love Exxon again. Let's do it. We can do it.
Yeah. Philip Morris needs some comedy injected into their campaign. So
there's some dark humor there. We could find that for sure.
That's awesome. I like to close with one question. What's the nicest thing anyone's done for you in your professional career?
Oh, I've got this, Sean. Early on when we started making videos,
Oh, yeah.
we made our first video, and then a nonprofit that had just gotten started called United Republic that ended up becoming Represent.us hired us kind of after the success of one video, and they're like, we want you guys to do this more often. And I had just quit my job. It was 3 days after I quit my job, and I got the phone call that was like, come like incorporate and then like start contract work for us. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. And what I didn't know until 7 years later was that there was a donor behind that. Her name is Jamie Wolf. She lives in LA. We've gotten to know her very well recently. She's an absolute sweetheart, and very quietly behind the scenes was funding our work, and without any recognition or expect for recognition. She just liked what we did, and continues even today. It was last year we wrote another Gil Fulbright spot and shot it. We had the budget and put it together, and Jamie heard that we had done that and cut the check for the entire production because she just was so just like a patron, like a Medici level, like, oh, I will give a grant to these artists. She was just a very sweet person and has done that for lots of different artists and architects, making LA beautiful. She's very incredible and so sweet. And we really owe our careers to her. So, and we didn't know this for a very long time.
Yeah,
So,
Represent Us is where we started, and they started at that point with no recognition, and then within 8 years we had videos with Jennifer Lawrence and Jack Black and Ed Helms, like all the celebrity support behind them, and they became a much better known organization. So thanks to Jamie Wolf for that. She saw the strategy when we didn't, and she saw us as assets when we didn't see that as something. We just thought we were comedians.
We were just dreaming of a potential career that would be so fun for us to do, and she quietly made that happen for us.
She did.
She's incredible. Yeah.
That's a cool story, right? It's like one person, like the doors they open up and the opportunity from that. That's a banger. That's one of the top ones, Ryan. Well done. That's a good one.
Jamie Wolf she's a special person.
She really is.
I don't want to say her age, but she's getting up there now, and we just adore her. We'll take her to dinner as many times as we can. Yeah.
Yeah, truly.
Well, cool. Well, I just love what you guys are doing. Where should people go if they want to learn more about your agency, about what you guys are working on? Where can we point?
KleierBrothers.com. Think Old MacDonald, EIE, KLEIER, brothers.com. There it is.
This might be backwards, but
yeah. Business card up in here. Nice.
I know.
People still use those. Yeah.
We have stats of them.
Yeah, and a bunch of our work is there, and you can find out how to reach out to us from there too.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put some of my favorite videos that they've done in the show notes. I'll obviously put in the Pullman video from New York. It's a classic still, and it holds up. But, dude, this was so fun, Ryan. It's been a blast to just catch up after a few years, man. So very cool to see what you're doing. And Sean, always good to chat, man. But excited to keep talking and see what you guys do.
Sounds good, man.
Appreciate it, Jim. Thanks so much, man.